Hello, hello. I don't know what I'm doing here, but here I am. This is a different type of podcast for me. And I do have Andrew Housley coming on, hopefully, if I did this right. And he is a yoga teacher, a podcaster, and an author. And we're going to talk about his books today. So, and other things. He used to work at Village Yoga right before I started. So I want to talk to him about that too. I've taken a few of his classes and they're amazing. So I'm not sure if I need to, I don't know how to do it. We'll figure it out as we go, I guess. But this is a new, and there he is.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Fantastic. I assume you can hear me pretty well.
I can.
What do you
This
think of
is
this
pretty
platform?
cool. I do like this. It
Yeah.
seems easy for the person who doesn't know what to do.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many other cool features in it too that we're excited to kind of use as the transcription process. AI goes through the whole thing and kind of like picks out best parts and kind of, eliminates a lot of whole, like going back and listening in real time. So we're kind of excited about that. So maybe we
That
can
is
learn some better.
exciting.
Yeah. So
Very
what's going
cool.
on in
I
your world?
already, hmm?
What's going on in your world? I haven't seen your face in a long, long time.
I know, I know. Just teaching, village closed and kind of flailed around for a little while. And then I got a call from, do you know Mandy Northrup?
Is it? No, not.
She was kind of in the circles of the village yoga. But anyway, she gave me a call and was like, "Hey, um, would you want to come teach a Wednesday night class?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, please, can I?" So that's how I
Where
got.
where is she? What's that studio?
It's Lunar Yoga Studio. Used to be Yoga Sila,
Yeah, the name
and
familiar. That it's up in Roswell, Alpharetta, right?
it's coming near the chicken plant.
Oh yeah, well then I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
way up there.
well it's good.
It's it's a good one.
So I'm glad to hear you're still teaching. Just teaching one day a week or what?
I got 2 days a week, and then I did this really cool thing for my husband's work. I kind of want to do that. It's a yoga challenge for like
Hmm.
a month,
Hmm.
and they do I do record a couple classes per week, and then I put them on YouTube with a link just for them, and they go on and
Nice.
do it and mark done. It's an honor system, but they really like it, so I got to figure out how to get to more
So
things.
what styles are you teaching?
um Basically like hatha yoga. I teach ashtanga,
Right.
diet ashtanga I call it, um because I'm a goofball and I like to be relaxed. And in the studio, they had never done Ashtanga before, so I kind of wanted to do the short form and kind of make it a
You do,
little.
you doing primary one? What are you doing?
Yes, primary one, short form. So you skip, oh, really naturally skip all the more difficult poses.
Hmm.
So it's really easy. And then once a month, we kind of throw some other surprises in there to keep the regulars guessing.
Nice.
But yeah, that's it. And then just a warm progressive flow on Sunday mornings.
Nice.
That's the other one. How about you? Are you teaching anymore?
I retired.
You did?
I did. Yeah. So I was teaching a lot all over the place, and like probably August of last year. Yeah, August of last year, just kind of hit a wall, and I was teaching I mean, I was probably teaching 10, 12 classes a week, and yeah,
Wow.
but I was a lot of the, well, doing. I was at I was at Windy Hill Athletic Club for a long time, and I kind of found a unique space in there. I was teaching hatha, and then I was teaching a vinyasa class. And at some point, probably right before COVID, they brought in a high performance tennis program for young adults, so anywhere from eight to 18.
Oh, wow.
And like it's it was a big program. Like these kids are intense tennis players at the age of 10. I mean, they're going to go on and be fantastic tennis players. And so the head coach came to me and said, "Hey, I'd love you to work with my students,
Oh, wow.
work with my program." And these kids are playing, they're showing up 4 days a week and playing and practicing tennis. Like that's like almost their full-time job. So they're going to school, they're coming here, they're spending 6 hours playing tennis every day, plus tournaments on the weekends. Like it was insane.
Oh,
So he came to me, he's like, "I'd love for you to teach not just, not just yoga asana, I want you to teach them mindfulness. I want you to teach them meditation, like the whole kit and caboodle." And I said no at first. Because honestly, all the years of teaching, I never taught kids.
oh, yeah.
And it's a different thing entirely. And then so he came back to me and he was like, "Hey, no, I really want you to come do this." And I was like, "All right." Because I believe in this idea that everything is here for your enlightenment. So I need to go put myself in this situation and learn to be a different teacher. And I learned a lot in that process of teaching those kids, and like created a tight bond with a lot of the high schoolers, because this mental health component that's coming in, they're starting to find their way through the world, and they're having, concerns about like, what happens if I don't like get to D1 tennis program? Am I a loser?
Oh, wow.
Like I don't want to disappoint my parents. I don't want to, all of this stuff. So it got so far removed from any kind of movement practice that we're sitting 2 or 3 days a week, just sitting, having conversations, like having conversations about mindfulness, Zen, all of these things. And like, it was really, really intriguing for them because they're so just like keyed up on like, let's move, let's move, let's move.
Yeah.
But I got to the point, honestly, I was wiped out physically and mentally. There was
Oh,
just
wow.
like I was coming home every night, and my partner, she's like, "What are you doing?" Like eating at 10 o'clock at night. I felt like the biggest hypocrite. And I'm talking about, I'm telling everyone to, be mindful and take care of your body inside and out. And I'm eating dinner at 9 o'clock, going to bed at 10, rinse and repeat at 6 a.m. and just going and going and going. And then my body was just like screaming to me. It's like, "Please stop, please
Yeah.
stop." And so I stopped, and I felt a whole lot better about it in the long run.
Oh, good.
Yeah. But I do miss the kids. That was and I learned so much about myself as a teacher, teaching those kids, that it was a pretty great experience.
Well, that's a good way to end then, I guess, right?
Yeah. Once you're on top, there's no place else to go.
Except for writing books. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah. So the book thing has been pretty fun. So
Yeah.
you read Invisible?
I did, and I've got I've got my waiting impatiently started, so that's exciting. I was going to ask you, so all my questions, one of them was, how did you get into yoga? And I don't know if it's like how you really got into yoga. It says on here that somebody took you and you went into a small, dark, desperate place inside a one-story office building.
Yeah. So let's to frame everything. Anything I write is like, when I use Ian in these stories, these are not autobiographical.
Okay.
Somebody asked me recently the same question, like, "Is that you?" And I was like, "No," but the way that I think about Ian in my own life is that I get as the writer, I get the advantage of having Ian in my life and being like my whipping boy, if you will. Where maybe through my life I took a right turn,
Uh-huh.
and like, okay, I was put in this situation, but I'm going to take Ian on the I'm going to take him to the left and see what happens and explore that with him and create that universe for him and see how he reacts and play with that. So, like, I believe every artist uses their own life as some sort of inspiration or whatever that is to try to build their world. So there's lots of things in both of these novels that I can see people finding a correlation between Ian and Andrew. I get it because it's there. It's real. Anybody who knows me is like, comes to me like, God, you sound just like that when you talk. Like, and I'm kind of insulted because Ian's kind of a jerk, right? And
He's cranky.
He's got some attitude problems, but he's been through some stuff. So to answer your question, yes and no. I mean, when I entered the discipline of yoga, oh gosh, it's probably 30 years ago now. There was no sexy studios. There was no hot yoga. There was no, I mean, teaching. Mostly it was like you knew a guy who knew a guy who went and studied with somebody somewhere and they came back. So there was none of this certification process. Like the world it wasn't this ubiquitous thing where the whole world had a yoga teacher in their life. Like right now, I feel like you and I, granted, we're in the yoga industry, but we probably know at least 10 or 12 other people on the sidelines that are yoga teachers too, right?
Yes.
Back then, that wasn't the case. And it was hard to find a yoga studio and it's hard to find all those places. So, yeah, I think the first place I did go to was a single story, probably a split office building with somebody else, like a strip center type thing.
Yeah.
And it was carpet on the floor and, it was dark and musky and it was gross.
Yeah.
But I found kind of my people there. And before that I was already deep into Zen Buddhism, but I kind of wanted to find the movement piece because I'd always been athletic. And I found that, and that's how it started for me. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. I really went there for the solitude, to be honest with you.
Oh, I like that.
And it turned into something else. You find your community.
Yes, I agree.
I think for me, it was like showed up and I just wanted to be kind of left alone. I wasn't trying to be, misanthropic or anything. I was like, I just need some space to be by myself. And then I started to find other people that were like kind of on the same journey. And that's how it started.
Yeah, I like that. That's good. That's how I kind of got that way later on into it, really. I was at Lifetime Fitness doing all the,
Sexy
cycling
stuff.
classes and this.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
And so but I didn't stretch. And so everybody's like, oh, you should go do yoga so you can stretch. And so here I was thinking, I'm going in to stretch. And it was not, yes, sure, I was more flexible, but it was not, it turned into something totally different, which I fell in love with. But at first I was like, oh gosh, what did I get myself into?
Right.
But
I was fortunate because I played soccer from like 8 until, whatever, I was 38 years old, but I was fortunate at a young age to have probably like 10 or 12, a soccer coach that was big into deep, long stretching, which no one back then cared about. No. It was like you run, you scrimmage, off the field, go home. And we would spend just as much time running as we did with like deep stretching. And now we would call it mobility, but those years that wasn't a thing. And so that was a great gift and ramped up to making yoga asana practice that much more accessible for me when I first got started. So that was a kind of a great gift.
Yeah.
And then once you realize that you've been kind of, I don't want to say lied to, but it's not stretching. But you get out, again, you get what you get. You get what you put in too.
Yes.
So if you think you're going to show up and it's going to be a stretching class, and that's all you want, then that's cool too.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. Too. That's what, yes, people, I love when people come in, they're like, oh, I can't wait to stretch. And I'm like,
yeah,
maybe at the end of class.
Yeah. I think the thing is I always used to preface my classes when people would come in with that kind of mindset or didn't know me or places I was guest teaching or something like that. And I would say, I'm not interested in your physical flexibility. I'm interested in the flexibility between your ears.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really where it is because, we can go through all of this and I can make, and any good teacher can make a body move and you can find that engagement. But if you're mentally not there and you're closed off and you're not receiving, it's not going to happen,
It's just moving. Yeah.
It's just moving. And if you have an expectation, and so our job as teachers in my mind is to help students find that next level for it, past stretching and past movement.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The way Mandy teaches and at her studio and the students come in and that's what they're really looking for is that level of practice. So she's gotten them in a good spot, which is really, I enjoy their interest and curiosity into that part of it too.
Yeah. And it's my experience is it's difficult because, again, yoga is so ubiquitous in our culture that that word gets thrown around just so haphazardly. It's like you go to a doctor and they're like, "Oh, doctor, I've like got some stress. Well, you just need to do yoga." Well, what does that mean? Well, I don't know. Just go do it. Or you see it in every commercial, and so there's like a kind of misconception about what really yoga is, and then so people show up to a studio that maybe they've never practiced before. They show up to a Lifetime Fitness, and they're intimidated, right? And like, I can't do that. I can't do what you're asking me to do. So our job as teachers is to try to let them understand it's more to the discipline's more than just bending and being bendy and stretching and all of that stuff. It's about other components that we need to help our students find. And again, good teachers help those students in that way. Break down those misconceptions or expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I do love the name of your podcast, No Expectations.
By design.
Yeah.
By
And
design.
I've been listening and I'm just loving all the stuff you guys talk about and how much you both get into a shorter period of time. Like your podcasts are what, like 20 to 30 minutes?
20, I mean, when we started, we thought we needed to do like an hour, and then it was like, okay, let's just talk until we're done talking about it. Again, no expectations, right?
Yeah.
So when we talk about like the name came about from the idea of this, this idea of when we show up in life and wherever it is that we become jaded the older we become, right? Like, let's say I had a cup of coffee, and the first cup of coffee I ever had, maybe at whatever 6 or 7 years old, was probably great. Well, let's just say it was great, right? But then as I get older and I've had so many cups of coffee throughout the world and so many different experiences with a cup of coffee, I become jaded. Like, that first cup of coffee was always great, but this one's not so great, whatever. And so when Jen and I started talking about what the podcast was going to be about and all that stuff, it was about, let's just show up with no expectations, because that's kind of what we all want in life, isn't it? Like, no expectations. Like, we don't want to put expectations on each other, and we don't want to put expectations on ourselves, because when we do that, we don't open ourselves up to the possibilities of what if, right?
Yeah.
And like, going back to the spiritual part, it's about showing up with a child's mind. Right. So that first cup of coffee was great. If I can reconnect to that first experience of a cup of coffee as I get older, that's the tricky bit. So no expectations, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we do. So just always having fun with it. And we also don't believe that, just because you're on a spiritual journey just mean you have to speak in hushed tones, and, you can still be who you are. You can be all those bright colors of who you are. You don't have to be vanilla. And I think that's again, that you may or may disagree with that, but I think a lot of spirituality, people think, oh, you've just got to be calm and collected and cool all the time and speak in hushed tones. Do you believe that?
No, I don't. Well, and listening to you guys too, and you joke around, but you can still talk about the ideas that you're talking about, and I love that.
That was what it was all. I mean, Jen and I met. When I left Village,
Mm-hmm.
I started teaching at another studio, and um, this was right before COVID, right before lockdown. And I had met Jen. She was a student, and I'm sure Jen will be more than happy that I'm going to talk about her right now. But it was one of those experiences that years of teaching has allowed me to kind of look at my students and go, kind of understand them at a different level, like at an energy level. And I knew Jen was kind of going through something. I didn't know Jen. I didn't, but I knew just the way her energy was and where she was and what she was trying to do was she was on a journey. And so we kind of connected there, student teacher, and then COVID hit, and then we were all, locked down as that seems crazy that we're having this conversation because that seems a million years ago, right?
It's
And I just started teaching online straight away. Like right when we got locked down, I was like, let's do this. Let's start teaching because it was more of a give back.
yeah.
I was like, because mental health's going to go take a dip here. So reached out to all the students that I knew and was like, hey, I'm going to do this. And then so Jen and she started showing up to classes and she, hit me on a sidebar and she's like, hey, I really want to learn more than asanas. I want to go deeper.
Oh.
And I said, sure. I said, what do you want to know? She's like, I want to know it all. And I was like, okay. So I said, let's start with the study of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. So we would meet 2 or 3 times a week via Zoom and go line by line.
Oh, wow.
And we would take maybe 30 minutes just to go through one sutra.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
let's talk about it. Let's understand it. Let's see how we can put it into a real world experience. And that's what we did. And we got through it all. It probably took us 2 or 3 months
Oh,
to
wow.
get through it all. And then after that, we started, kind of the world kind of opened back up. We started meeting together and having coffee and just having these same kind of conversations in public. And I just kept noticing people like leaning in, like, what are these guys? What are they talking about? And that's kind of where the idea of the podcast came about. I was like, let's have these conversations in a real way that people can access, maybe put into their real life. And that's what we started with. And it's always been DIY.
I love it.
We may have like a rough idea before we get together. We might have we'll text each other like, hey, I want to talk about this because this happened to me this week and I want to talk about it.
Okay.
And that's how we work on it. And so that's how it's always been. And I expect it will always be. I like the chemistry that she and I have, that she's got a different perspective on the world than I do. And, 30 plus years of reading Zen Buddhist literature has made my mind, melt. And so she's she's thinking about the world differently than I am. So I love that kind of like back and forth.
Yeah.
So
it's good. Yeah.
We have fun with it.
I love it. All right. Before I get off on this is me. This is what I do. I write all this stuff down and I talk about other stuff, which I'm cool with. We don't edit ours either. I want it all on there. I don't care if I mess up. I want it on there.
That's where the beauty is, right? The beauty's in the accidents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I think it's from years of my son putting me on the internet, on all his social stuff without me getting to prepare, kind of throwing me off. And I'm like, oh, okay. All right. Well, here we are. So, and I love that. I love how it ends up. Every time I plan something, it never works out exactly right. So here we go. So, I'm going to let you talk. Let's talk. So you wrote Waiting Impatiently first.
I did.
So how did that all come about? Had you always wanted to write something, or did it were you like, man, I just gotta get this down on paper or
Uh,
on the computer.
yeah, I've been fortunate that I've had the gift of creative urge since I was a kid. My first love was music, and so I was a musician for a long time, and then writing songs, and then wrote poetry early on in my career. But I never thought I could write long form. It just never was in my brain to say, oh, I can do this. I could sit down and like write a long story, because I would sit around and read some really heavy literature, and I was like, and to my detriment, I was comparing myself to those guys, like guys
Oh,
that I like would really respect.
yeah.
I'm like, well, I'll never be able to write a story like Camus or Heinrich Boll or any of these artists that I really love. So I was like, well, it's not in my wheelhouse. So I had you know gone through some stuff and some life changes, and I realized I was in a scenario that something really miraculous happened in my life, and I was like, this is a great story, and I was like, I want to see if I can write this, and full uh full respect to my partner at the time. I think we all say a lot of things in life, like I'm gonna go whatever, hike Mount Everest, or I'm gonna go write a novel or whatever. And at that point, I said to her, I was like, hey, I want to write this story. I want to write a novel. And she said to me, she's like, go do it. She's like, you can do this. Right. And, and probably most people say that to their partner, like, go do this. Right. But it was that kind of push, that kind of trust where somebody's like, yeah, I got you, go do this. And I just started. And I had no plan when I started waiting. I had no notes. I had nothing. It was just all inside of me. And and the way what I really credit it to is discipline. And that can go all the way back to whatever you want to talk about. If you say if it's yoga asana or whatever that is, showing up repeatedly and seeing what happens. Because by not showing up, you're missing the opportunity of what could be. And so when I started writing, I told myself what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my phone off at 2 o'clock every day, and I'm going to write or attempt to write for at least 2 hours, and then do that every day, and just see what happens. And there was something very cathartic about turning the phone off and saying, you can't find me for 2 hours. And I didn't tell anybody I did this. I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
And so I would just start to sit down and write and just see what happens and just see what happens. And it just kept going. And I was like, oh, this is really fun. I really enjoy this. This is really, really fun. And so my partner, this went on for like maybe a week or two. And she came over to my place and she was like, she said, well, why don't you show me what you've written? Because at that point, she'd never seen anything. She never read anything I'd written. It's like, I'd said I want to write a book. But she's like, I've never seen you write anything or read anything. So I was like, oh, okay. So I gave her what I had, and she read it, and she came out and she's like, are you plagiarizing something? Like, where did this come from? And I was like, I just sat there and wrote this for the last week and a half or whatever. And she was like, no, there's no way that you can produce this much in such a short period of time. And that was just kind of like, oh, okay, so it's not bad, right? And she's like, no, it's really good, and I'm blown away and all that stuff. So that was kind of like more fuel for the fire to like to continue the journey with it. So I had written Waiting in keeping that kind of that pace. I wrote it in 3 months.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Wrote it in 3 months, and pretty much it was done. I would say it was done in 3 months. It went to some light editing, and then came back, and there was really not much to it. So again, it was so fast that it was kind of mind-boggling that it got done so fast.
Wow.
But what it did to me is it proved that I could write long form.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, let's go see if I can write this next book. And I went in there with this, again, I'm such a hypocrite. I went in there with an expectation that I'm going to write what became Invisible Sun in 3 months. And it took me a lot longer than that.
Did it?
Yeah, it took me a
So,
lot
but
longer.
the other one was just flowed right out.
Yeah, as you may realize now, like waiting is much more abstract than Invisible. It's not as like, there's a lot of moving components in it.
Yeah.
Um, where Invisible is much more, it's non-linear, but there's a lot of dialogue in it. So the style is much different. So yeah, I think waiting just came out. It just fell out. And it was just, again, to prove myself that I could actually do this.
Yeah. So is that your thing? Like, are you going to keep going?
Yeah, I have another idea. I'm working on another book now, so I'm going to retire Ian for a while. He's gone through enough.
He
Um,
needs a break.
he needs
No.
a break. He does need a break. So I'm working on some other another book, and actually I'm actually in process of turning Invisible into a screenplay.
Ooh, that would
So
be awesome.
yeah, it's kind of already got all the dialogue, so it's just a matter of turning it into a screenplay form, which is, again, a medium that I'm not that familiar with. So I'm like, let's go try it.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that would be, well, I'll keep my eye out for that because I'm like, I talk about, I mean, I plowed through that book. I was like, oh my gosh,
I've been
this is
told it's a
great.
tough read.
It, you mean like what happens in it and everything? Or
I mean, it's dark and it's heavy, and
yes, I might like that a little. I don't know. Maybe that's what, maybe I was looking for something to turn around and then it just kept going and going and I kept going and going.
right,
But I do feel like it was a good result. Like he's in an okay place now without giving it all away, which so I think I got that as I'm turning and looking and searching, like I hope he's going to be okay, or you
right,
know that kind of a thing. And then towards the end, again, without giving it away, it I felt complete at the end is what I'm saying. Like
right.
I don't feel.
Yeah, I mean that was a completely different story than Waiting, and it's. I think a lot of people got bogged down, and I mean, I'm not giving anything away because it's part of the description of the story. The suicide. I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, that's too heavy," and all of that stuff. And I think is our job as creatives and artists is to not look away from stuff that's painful.
Yeah.
And like suicide is a real thing, and it's like at epidemic standpoints in our culture right now. And
Yes.
by like looking away from it and saying, "Oh, it's ugly," I understand it exists, but I don't want to read about it. I think we're doing a disservice to ourselves and the experience of other people around us by not examining it.
And I think it's a, well, I mean, if you've never experienced that happening in your life, it is a good way. I don't know if I'm making this sound right or not, but it is a good way to kind of see how one might handle it, or two people, like the brother handled it a totally different way.
Right. And
So
that was,
it's good
yeah,
to
I mean,
know.
it's like, but again, while a lot of people sometimes get bogged down in the death and the suicide, in in my mind, it's more about a conversation about the purpose or the what life is to you. Because as Ian goes through this journey, he meets all of these cast of characters that only can be found in New Orleans. I mean, New Orleans is a character in itself for the story, but they all have a different perspective about what life is.
True.
And they're all conversing with him in a variety of different ways, and he's learning in that process. And early in the story, the homeless man that's on the bicycle with the chicken in the basket in the front, again, typical New Orleans, just yells out randomly, "Life is a gift, don't waste it." It's like the world, the universe is communicating to us in strange and different ways all the time. And sometimes it takes the strangest interaction with a complete stranger that's just minute to kind of twist your perspective just a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's going on in that story for me, as Ian kind of goes through this arc of being in a really bad place and then getting into an even worse place. And then he kind of realizes, he starts to think about what is life, and how do we all think about it, and what do we want from this journey, and all of that stuff. So that was a tough book to write, I'll be quite honest with you.
Going as a reader, going through the emotional journey and sort of knowing you, I was like, oh my gosh, was he
Mm-hmm.
okay? During this time, it was different to have some connection, be going to your yoga classes and stuff
Right.
like that, to sort of know you but not know you. And so you're like, oh my gosh, is he okay? Did this really happen? Is his dad mean? Like,
Right.
is he, did he go through this stuff? And so there was that extra little kind of emotional
Yeah. And
journey.
so, full disclosure, I mean, like, I did lose my oldest brother, to suicide. So
Oh,
that was the kind of catalyst to that story. It wasn't. So the rest of the story is a lot of fiction and all of that stuff. But that was the catalyst.
okay.
Like, this kind of like trying to make sense of that.
Yeah.
And trying to go through that. Now, was my father Ian's father? No, they weren't the same, and did I some all the worst things that happened to Ian throughout the story, didn't happen in my life. But I wanted to, again, explore taking a left with Ian and putting
Yeah.
him through the ringer, and kind of having that philosophical discussion internally. What is this all about? What's important here? So, yeah.
It was very, I loved it. It was
I
great.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Well,
So,
I don't want to keep you too long. Because we would be here for like 3 hours. But what I do want to ask, because we have our book club
mhm.
on once a month on Sundays, if I think they may be braver to read Waiting Impatiently, but if we if we can pick, if I can get a decision from them for our next book, would you want to come and
Certainly,
discuss it with us?
certainly.
Yay. Okay, cool. Well, I'll keep you posted on that. And I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
And I may or may not keep in touch with you with questions. I've been writing a murder mystery for like 15 years
Hmm.
about experiences. So I may have to pick your brain on that kind of stuff.
Do it. I mean, that's what we're all here for. I do want to, I mean, maybe we have a conversation outside of this, but I kind of want to know what you're doing with this, and like,
Oh, yeah.
so we can have this conversation here or outside of that.
Yeah, I can. Do I just press stop and then we keep talking, or?
Yeah, I think you press stop record.
Okay.